your pelvic floor is stronger than you think. Your body is stronger than you think. And then to treat it like you would any other problem. Step outside your body and think, okay, my body, look at it from a less emotional standpoint. It's how I try to look at my own body. I'm like, okay, I'm the therapist. I'm going to go over here into my therapist corner and look at my body. Okay, how can I start systematically preparing my body for this load? And it might start really small. It might start with like little tiny jumps where you're working on absorbing the landing with no pressure, no people, experimenting with different types of breathing. I go through like 3 or 4 different ways to breathe when you jump, because not one breathing strategy works for everybody. Sometimes we have to work through things, and sometimes when the jumping gets bigger, you have to try something different.
Welcome to The Flower Empowered, and today we have a wonderful guest, Sarah Duval, who is a PT. She qualified as a personal trainer back in '99, and since then has gone on to become, she has a Bachelor's of Science in Physiotherapy along with a Master's and a PhD. On top of all this, she is a mother to 2 children, and she leads a very active life, and she inspires women to try to regain their strength after having babies and encourages women to come back to their full potential. So welcome, Sarah.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's really great. I mean, I love your work, and I love that you inspire women. And I'm really interested to know, pelvic health is obviously, it's quite unique. And I'm wondering, did you study physiotherapy with the idea of getting into pelvic health, or was it some experience you had that caused you to go down this road?
Well, most people don't start out with thinking, oh, I'm going to study pelvic health when they're, 20. So, it wasn't until I had my first child and had some pelvic floor issues of my own that I dove in, because I was an ortho PT.
Okay.
Treated a lot of back pain, and my specialty area was kind of the SI joint. So I was already in the pelvis anyway. So I did my doctorate work on the SI, and I only have a doctorate. I do not have a PhD. My husband has a PhD, and those are 2 different things.
Okay.
So I just have a doctorate. So I had to go back to school and get more education, and I did my doctorate research project on the SI joint because was always an area of the body that fascinated me because it wasn't so clear. I feel like other things are very clear.
Yeah. And obviously, if you've experienced some issues following childbirth, you have a reason to start to investigate. But how did you, how did you end up really going deep into it? Was it, did you decide to create the programs out of your own dysfunction, or how did it pan out?
I went to the local pelvic floor PTs in my area could not give me any help.
Okay.
So I just got told to do more Kegels, and that did not help me at all.
Okay.
So then that made me take a whole look at pelvic floor function and how it functions with the rest of the body. I spent almost a year reading every study I could get my hands on, just to understand the research that was out there, what we actually knew about the pelvic floor, how it functioned, and how it integrated with the rest of the body. And I just found a lack of research and information on the integration of the pelvic floor with the kinetic chain.
Yes.
So we look at, we tend to isolate things in westernized medicine instead of looking at the body as a whole. And just from treating chronic back pain for years, I've looked everywhere for stuff. Fixing people's head positioning to help their low back pain. And so I looked at the pelvic floor the same way and started asking around and found out, wow, okay, a lot of my patients have more pelvic floor issues than I, ever thought. And it just tended to get glossed over in the ortho world. And so when I actually started focusing on it, I had a lot of women that I could start experimenting on. I hate to say the words experimenting, but I could start experimenting on.
But you have to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, exactly. And most of them had been told it was normal, that their leaking was normal, or this was just how it is, or they had been to pelvic floor PT and they hadn't gotten help, or they'd been and they'd only gotten a little bit of help. And so then I was like, okay, let me see what we can do. Let's play around with this a little bit. So then my specialty kind of became the group that went to pelvic floor PT, got some help or didn't get some help, and then I was the next layer of troubleshooting. So I was like, okay, we know you can contract your pelvic floor muscles. You've got that down. You've worked with somebody. Let's figure out what else is going on that's holding you back from making improvements. And so then I got to do the fun mystery of how the pelvic floor interacts with everything else. And then we find that key piece and we're like, oh, that worked. And then all of a sudden we get like their iliac is turned back on. And then all of a sudden their pelvic floor is contracting well on that side, and they've got 5 out of 5 strength and a full Kegel, where before, no matter how much they practiced it, they couldn't get it. So that's kind of what happened.
So the secret is in digging in to find, okay, if we look at the pelvic floor in isolation, we are looking at a piece to a rather large puzzle. So you reached out, and I know you've also looked at anatomy trains. I've done some anatomy trains training myself, and it's really fascinating.
It's fascinating. Yes, it's so fascinating what all is connected within the body, and I find people give up too soon. And that bothers me. I don't want people to give up too soon. And they're like, well, I've tried this and I've tried that. I'm like, yeah, but you haven't tried all of this. So I think that's become part of my mission, and what I feel like is my purpose is to help spread hope and help educate on the complexity of the topic.
Yes.
And when women think, okay, I'm going to throw in the towel, I mean, don't throw in the towel yet. If you had something else going on, you probably wouldn't throw in the towel yet. If this was something wrong with your child, you wouldn't throw in the towel yet. Like, don't give up on your body.
Are you finding that women are open to coming out and talking about these issues, or do you still see that there is a taboo around this subject?
Well, I think it depends on where you're looking. I mean, I've got a great group within my program where there's no TMI, everybody's comfortable, everybody shares. But I think in the general public, I still, as I mean, it's still very much an embarrassing topic. And it is embarrassing. There's no way to tiptoe around that. Men aren't talking about their erectile dysfunction in their social circles, so it's still, even for men, like this is still a very personal issue. So the more we can talk about it, the better.
Yeah, I think it's, one of the missions here is to try and break the taboo so that people will talk about these issues. Because obviously the more we share and the more we talk, then the more likely the woman that is having a problem that isn't already connected to your group or some other group will get the information that she needs.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Encouraged.
A lot of women go to their doctors. I was one of those women, and are sent to a urogynecologist or a gynecologist, and they're told right off the bat, oh, you need to have surgery for mild stress incontinence or a very, very slight prolapse. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that prolapse can heal, which I know just flies in the face of everything, but we're starting to see that and we're starting to recognize that. Mm-hmm. Why would we be selective that fascia can heal in one part of the body and not heal in other parts? So when we look at this, I like to look at the body rationally. Yeah. All right, so let's just take a step back and take a big picture. If a diastasis can heal, okay, the fascia in the midline, yep, then the pelvic floor fascia that's stretched out can also heal. It just needs to be in an environment that is conducive to healing, and that is very hard to come by because the pelvic floor is not something that we can easily see. Yes. And so that's where all of that education comes in. So yeah, I mean, I definitely would. I mean, I rehabbed my own grade 2 prolapse.
Brilliant.
So, and I'm doing high intensity sports. It's not like I'm a walker. Yeah. So, I mean, I am testing my system for every, extent of the imagination of testing it. So yeah, I think that there's so much possibility for healing.
And when you have women, obviously you've created a number of different programs. And one of the things that I liked when looking at your programs is that there are some questions to try and lead the user down into the right program for that person. So would you want to talk a little maybe about the different types of programs that you have on offer?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I started with the pelvic floor program, and then it just kind of grew based on demand. I spend 90% of my time taking care of the women that are paying me and about 10% on social media. Okay. It's really lacking. But I just feel like, this is the people that I pledged to help, so I'm helping them. But yeah, so they were in there and they're like, okay, we're working through things and we're troubleshooting, and they needed more abdominal work. So I'm like, okay, let me work on building out this abdominal program. So I do have an abdominal diastasis program, but not everybody that needed pelvic floor help needed it. So I kept them separate. And the thing to keep in mind, I get so many emails each week from women who want to fix their diastasis, want to help their stomachs without addressing their pelvic floor. And studies show us that women who heal a diastasis faster have more prolapse than women who don't. So this is such an important thing to keep in mind, because we're always like, oh, heal the diastasis. And you see lots of, other online programs that are like, oh, your diastasis causes your pelvic floor issue. Well, it's actually probably the other way around. And the diastasis is creating a protective effect against the pressure in the abdomen that can cause a pelvic floor issue. So always starting with a pelvic floor program or pelvic floor specialist before trying to work on getting your abs back together and building core pressure and building ab strength. I think it's so important because we don't want to leave the pelvic floor behind. Oh. So there's my
definitely not. It's
vanity.
It's such a critical part of the body, and I mean, considering we don't talk about it, but we sit on it for most of the day usually.
Exactly.
We need to pay attention. And so if somebody comes to you and they're just starting on a program, or they're coming to you for physiotherapy, and you're starting to work with them, how quickly do you think they can see results? What would you say to somebody who's thinking of going now to a pelvic floor physiotherapist or going to do one of the programs?
That's such a tough question. I've had women where they've done 2 weeks of my program and something clicks, and all of a sudden they're like, Sarah, I don't feel any prolapse symptoms anymore. And like 3 weeks, I'm like, okay, how is that possible? But it was just that one thing they needed to hear, and it was early in the program, or it was in our session, and we really cued into it. And then there's women where, it's going to take a year. It's going to take hard work and dedication and troubleshooting and emotional effort and mental pain, and then we'll find it. And so I think it depends on how long you've been having the issues, how long you have been either holding your pelvic floor tight, what's going on with your hips, if you've been in a shallow breathing pattern forever, all of these things. If you come into me with this great working system and we have to fine tune a couple things, you're going to be in and out the door.
Yeah.
But if you come in and you're like, I've had knee pain, I've had hip pain, my back is tight, I have forward head posture, and I'm like, okay, we got some things to work through. It's going to be a little while. But you know what? When you come out of this, you're going to feel great all over, because the pelvic floor is a whole body issue. Yeah. And so it often involves having to work on lots of things. So yeah, so I think that's kind of a loaded question, but it's what you come in with. So for some women, it's an easy fix, and then for others, it takes some work. But I feel like no matter how bad it is, you can always get better.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I had my mesh removed, was completely incontinent, and it took a year and a half, and I was back doing really strong workouts, jumping jacks, you name it. I mean, it is possible. It is possible to heal. So, but
it is possible to heal.
We just need to be educated, and we need to make sure that we see the right people and get the help that's needed. And I think that's critical.
And get second opinions. In my group that comes with my program, I have a pelvic floor PT.
Okay.
In there, and I mean, I'm trained as well, but I need somebody to ask second opinions too. Okay. I'm like, oh, I haven't seen that before. Have you seen that? Give me another opinion. I've got an ortho PT, and I have a neuro movement person that has weird drills with eye stuff, and I mean, it's always like, so if the exercises aren't working, we're like, okay, Gloria, step in, give us something really weird here to have this person work on, because she helps people work through trauma.
Okay.
So a lot of times you can't get things to fire correctly because there's still some trauma that needs to be worked through, especially around the birth process. And so I find getting that second opinion, and I'm trying to provide that second opinion in there, because no one person has all the answers. Yeah. So, I mean, if you've seen two people and you haven't gotten help, go see a third, go see a fourth, like, you're worth it.
Yeah, don't give up. Don't go to the surgeon. That's what I think,
Keep going. Go see other people. And I've dedicated my life to physical therapy, and from the beginning, and trying to understand the human body. And I mean, I even know my own limitations. you know.
Yeah.
I don't know everything, which is why I love to continue learning from people.
Did you learn your limitations the hard way, like me, or did you figure it out the easy way?
I know I have to learn everything the hard way.
Yeah.
But no, yes, it's good. And I think the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know because of the complexity of the body. A decade ago, I thought I knew a lot more than I know now.
Yeah.
Because I'm actually starting to understand how some things work. And I'm like, wow, that's really complicated. If you think it's simple, you don't understand it yet.
Exactly. If you can explain it simply, you're doing well. And I think that's maybe something that you're able to do. If we talk about the women that want to try and have a more active life like you, I mean, I've seen, you're climbing and you're participating in really intense sports. Mm-hmm. What advice do you give to someone who has had incontinence and has maybe rehabilitated but is afraid to do these activities but wants to? What would you say to those ladies?
Your pelvic floor is stronger than you think. Your body is stronger than you think. And then to treat it like you would any other problem. Step outside your body and think, okay, my body, look at it from a less emotional standpoint. It's how I try to look at my own body. I'm like, okay, I'm the therapist. I'm going to go over here into my therapist corner and look at my body. Okay, how can I start systematically preparing my body for this load? And it might start really small. It might start with like little tiny jumps where you're working on absorbing the landing with no pressure, no people, experimenting with different types of breathing. I go through like 3 or 4 different ways to breathe when you jump, because not one breathing strategy works for everybody. Sometimes we have to work through things, and sometimes when the jumping gets bigger, you have to try something different. Mm-hmm. So I think that's important, just to not be afraid to experiment. And then trust that the ground that you've gained is going to hold. And then everybody has setbacks. Yeah. I share my setbacks very frequently with the women, because if you're not having a setback, you're probably not pushing into something new. Yeah. And so take that setback. So studies have shown, even in the business world, that those that aren't afraid of a setback, that those that can look at a setback with a positive learning mindset, or more likely to have high success in the long run with whatever they take on. And that includes pelvic floor rehab. So if you have that setback, maybe you try something new and you have some leaking, or maybe you go, do something adventure with your kid and you end up feeling your prolapse again. Take it and be like, okay, break the process down. What happened? What did I do? And then how can I learn from it? And then once you have enough of those, you can become invincible.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing to note is that the body is constantly changing. So if you've worked and you've put in all this effort and then you think, okay, now I'm done, I'm never going to do anything with my pelvic floor again, then, you will do something one day and it will go, hello, remember me?
Oh, yeah. And the biggest one that always catches women off guard that I find is stress. So I'll see a woman in the group and she's like, I was well, I was not leaking, I was doing all this stuff, and now all of a sudden I've started having symptoms again. I'm like, all right, tell me a little about what's going on. Well, my grandmother died, and my so-and-so moved in with us, and my kid's teething and not sleeping. And I'm like, okay, this has nothing to do with your pelvic floor and everything to do with just how much tension you're holding in your body, and tension disrupts proper movement. Yeah. And so if I can just down-regulate that sympathetic nervous system and turn on that parasympathetic system and get them into more of that relaxed state and recognizing stress for what it is. We all have stress. Yeah. At different times, the stress is higher, but learning how to manage it, because no one is going to have a stress-free life. Yeah. So you've got to learn how to manage the stress without letting it take over your body. I see women who, and this is I give out weird homework assignments, but if I'm watching a woman and she's like, okay, I'm not quite getting it, I'm having a relapse, or I'm having stuff isn't clicking, and I'm looking at her face and I can see the outline of her masseter muscle in the video, I'm like, okay, your homework assignment for the entire weekend is to smile. And then I get this grumble back, and I'm like, oh, yeah, you really need it. Because we think about the anatomy trains, and we think about the connection with our fascia and the entire body. We think about those deep cervical flexors and how they connect down into our pelvic floor. It's no surprise that when we're super stressing out our jaw and our diaphragm in the roof of our mouth, that we are stressing out our entire system, all the way down to our pelvic floor.
Yeah.
And
And
so
maybe also holding a dysfunctional breathing pattern, because obviously when we're stressed, we do up here.
Of course. Yeah. And so, I mean, just looking at all these things where your relapse could come from something else entirely, and it could be more of an emotional trigger and more of a stress trigger than an actual, your pelvic floor did not abandon you and all your work was not for nothing.
Can you maybe talk us through a breathing technique? Like, how do we check that we're breathing properly for our pelvic floor?
Absolutely. Okay. So the popular way to teach breathing is shallow versus deep, right? So people put a hand on your belly and a hand up here on your shoulder and inhale. So, but the thing I don't like about this is that, yes, you need a deep breathing pattern. So when you breathe up, air and pressure goes up into your neck and shoulders,
Yes.
which means it does not go down into your expanding your diaphragm fully. And so that means it doesn't put pressure down on your pelvic floor. So think about the pelvic floor as this nice little balloon that's sitting there. And when you inhale down, you get a little stretch. And then when you exhale, it comes back to its resting position.
Yeah.
So for every deep breath you do, you get a little bit of natural give and ebb and flow to the pelvic floor. So you keep it kind of moving all day. This movement makes our body happy. When you sit in one position and don't let your body move, it hurts.
Yeah.
I mean, no matter whether you're stuck in a cramped plane seat for 7 hours or you're just simply holding your pelvic floor tight because you're not getting those good deep inhales, it's going to come back to bite you. Our body likes to move. But the thing that I don't like about the simplicity of the belly breathing is that most of the women I see have pelvic floor tightness in the back and laxity in the front. Not always, but tends to be more the majority of what I see. And so when you only belly breathe, you tend to get a little bit more expansion into the front of the pelvic floor. And so we want to really focus on expanding evenly through the pelvic floor and getting even diaphragm expansion. So if you place your hands around your rib cage with your thumbs sitting on the back of your rib cage, now drop your thumbs down so they sit right on the bottom. So you're on like your last rib. Now give me a nice big inhale. Can you feel your thumbs move back?
Yep.
And if your pinkies are down on your abdomen, can you feel your pinkies move as well as your thumbs?
Just a little, yeah.
Okay, so this is that nice deep breath that expands everything. So we get full diaphragm expansion to the back, sides, and front. And then we get expansion of our sides, back, and our core, which then helps to evenly expand the pelvic floor. So if you've got pain, tightness, even if you've just got like some of that like tailbone pain or tightness, piriformis pain or tightness, leaking, especially if you have a little bit of tightness, that can help release the back of the pelvic floor and can help get that even expansion so then you can get a good contraction.
Do you advise anyone to do like sitting on a tennis ball, for example, to try and kind of ease the...
Yeah, and you release the superficial muscles that way. So superficial just means one's on the outside. So when you sit on the tennis ball, you release the muscles that are close to the tennis ball, but the muscles are up on the inside as well. Yeah. And they're very hard to get to. So you might need to go see a pelvic floor PT in person to get to the inside muscles, or you can use one of the little pelvic wands. Or you can go get a pelvic floor PT to show you how to use one of those wands.
I think pelvic floor PT is the best idea. I think you know, of course there's a lot that we can do for ourselves, and there's, you know, we can assess and we can try different things.
And you can go into a pelvic floor PT and they can find the tight muscle for you and like say, oh, this is your obturator, this guy's tight, here's how you can work on it if you want to, or you can come back in and see me. But they can give you so many tools to actually tell you what's going on with your pelvic floor.
Yeah. And I know that you do train the trainer programs. So obviously your programs have been taught to very many people across the world, I believe. So how can people find those that have been trained in your programs?
I have a map on my website.
Okay.
And so it's a very extensive training. It's a lot of hours and a lot of study reading. And I did it for ortho PTs that wanted to learn more about the pelvic floor, for personal trainers who wanted to understand what was going on. And I've had a lot of pelvic floor PTs take it because to learn the kinetic chain and the exercises, not just the pelvic floor part. So it's kind of a fun mix. But I'm like, I did all this research and I wanted to share it and not keep it to myself. I'm like, this is good stuff. These are good connections. I dove down every rabbit hole and read all of these studies. I'm like, I want to put it together and be able to, you know, give it to the world instead of keeping it.
Yeah, I mean, sharing is caring, right?
Well, and I think the more we learn and the more we learn from each other, I mean, I take a lot of continuing education every year. So the more we learn from each other, the more we can all be better and the more women we can help everywhere and men. So.
And do you find that when you share your knowledge, more knowledge comes back to you?
Oh, yeah. Well, teaching is hard. Like you said, you have to really know something to simplify it. So there's that level of understanding where you're kind of grasping it. Then there's a level of understanding where you can fully apply it. And then there's a level of understanding where you can actually teach it. And then there's a level of understanding where you can teach it and not worry about the questions you're going to get back.
And how do you fit it all in? Because obviously you're a mom and you have all of these programs going and you work and you train people. How do you manage to still also lead an active life?
Boundaries. Healthy boundaries. This is going back to that stress question, right? Boundaries are really important. But I've taken things in life in phases. I tend to look at things as stages of life, and we're all in different stages of life, and we just have to embrace whatever stage we're in for what it is. I mean, there's a stage in life where you're not going to get a lot of sleep because it's going to wake you up. And then there's other stages that are a little freer with your time. You wonder once you have kids how you were ever stressed out before you have kids, but It's all relative. So I sold my in-person practice when we moved. My husband, his lab closed, and so we moved across the country, and then I started another practice, and then that lab got bought out. He's in biotech, and so we moved to yet another place, another state across the country. At one point, I had licenses in 3 different states.
Wow.
And so I was like, you know what? When we moved to Boston, I was like, I am going to start an online business. I'm just going to see the writing on the wall here because I was tired of starting from scratch.
Yeah.
And so that kind of pushed me online. And then when we moved here, I started seeing people part-time instead of full-time. And that allowed me the time to research and build programs and have the time to talk to you.
Fantastic.
So I split my time and then have some healthy boundaries in place and try not to work too much on the weekend and, all that good stuff.
Well, I know that you have helped very, very many women, and very many more will also benefit from your work. Is there any one piece of advice that you would give to, let's say, a new mother that has just had a baby? What would you say to her now if you could address her directly?
Don't be in a hurry, which is so hard. We all want to get our body back. I mean, I wanted to get back to sports and feeling like myself, but I think the more you rush the process of healing, and don't give your pelvic floor time to heal because the rest of you feels great. If you stay in shape during pregnancy, you're like, all right, I'm ready to go. Your arms are in shape, your legs are in shape, but your core is all stretched out. It needs time to come back. Your pelvic floor, if you had a vaginal delivery, and even if you didn't, you had a lot of laxity in your body preparing for a delivery, even if you did have a C-section. So you have to give your pelvic floor time to recover. And I think when your doctor or your midwife clears you at that 6-week appointment, that is just the first, okay, we really need to start working now. So setting those layers of foundation in the body, making sure that you have a great working pelvic floor before you stress your body, because the number of women that I have heard from and seen that say, I wish I would have known. Why did I do that? It breaks my heart. And that's what, if we can get the education out there to say, hey, Kate, take your time. Make sure you're not bearing down. What, you don't know what bearing down is? Okay, great. Time to learn. Can you feel your pelvic floor contract? No? Okay, you need to figure that out. These are things that instead of us just hoping everything will be okay, I think looking at that postpartum period as more of a rehab period from an injury. Okay, you just had your ACL repaired. All right, here are the steps to get back to your sport. Yeah. And I wish that pregnancy and delivery was looked at the same way.
Yeah, and of course there's many women who have gone a very long way past their postpartum period, and they also maybe need to listen to this same advice because
I've had women who have rehabbed prolapse 10, 15 years postpartum.
Yeah.
There's no point at which sometimes the body is just waiting for that catalyst for change. Sometimes it's just waiting for you to do something different so I can finally say, great, she gave me an opportunity to heal. She finally gave me a chance and started doing whatever it was that was preventing healing from happening. And just there's a lot of hope. I mean, if somebody has like a grade 4, grade 3 prolapse, it might not heal completely, but it might heal to a grade 2, or it might be manageable without surgery. And you know the complications of surgery
Yeah.
and why it's something we don't want to rush into and why we want to do everything we can.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, as you're progressing towards menopause, I mean, they do say that prolapse can be worse after menopause, but actually there's also been studies done to show that it can go the other way, and you can have a regression when you reach your menopause. So it really is worth working on getting that prolapse to as low a grade as you can through the conservative measures.
And getting as strong as you can. Because one thing I found with prolapse is the more active somebody is and the stronger somebody is, the less stress daily life is on the pelvic floor. I mean, because you can pick up that box from the Costco shopping cart and put it in the trunk without bearing down and without straining your pelvic floor. But if you don't have any strength, you can't perform daily life without straining. And I find it's that accumulative effect sometimes. So if I can get women stronger, if I can get them moving properly, if I can get their body just at a better place, and their pelvic floor is like, there's not so much strain on me, because the pelvic floor is the bottom stabilizer for the spine and the pelvis. So it plays such a role in when we step off a curb or we, do anything in life where we kind of run to the side and pick something up. Our pelvic floor is firing to help us. Yeah. And so the stronger the rest of the body is, the less stress on the pelvic floor.
And I've heard you say also that perfect practice makes perfect. My mum always says practice makes perfect, but I really love this. I think it's like it's taking it to the next level. So, I mean,
I do just don't want to stress people out about that. Things don't have to be perfect. You just have to be better. But yes, I do think that that especially applies to the women that have done everything or doing everything. And I had the cash pay out of pocket practice physical therapy clinic for a while, and which is I still have that, but working full time in that environment. And I would get the patients who had already been to 4 other PTs. And I'm like, okay, let me see what you're doing. And I'm like, oh, well, you're doing that exercise wrong. No wonder you're not. Like, let's keep the same exercise, but let's fine tune this point. And they're like, oh, I feel that in a completely different place. And I was like, and that's the point of this exercise. So that's where that perfect practice makes perfect. And, sometimes if you're doing something a little bit wrong, it might not be obtaining the goal that you think. And then you're wasting time, which is frustrating, but we can't get frustrated. We just have to try something else, keep moving, keep getting different opinions, keep learning, and keep having that exploratory mindset. Like, okay, I'm not feeling improvement here. Let me try something else. Yeah. And keep being open to that.
And remembering that you can do it.
Yes, absolutely. It might take some work, but I think your body is worth it.
So, we've launched the world's largest pelvic health directory with over 4,000 specialists in 48 different countries. And I know you have your map there with lots of different people that are teaching the programs that you've developed. Could you maybe tell people where they can find your programs? I mean, we will put some links down below as well, but maybe if you just tell people a little about your website or any...
Sure. So my website is coreexercisesolutions.com, but Sarah Duvall. So if you Google my name, I think I'm the only Sarah Duvall, so it's helpful. And I've got programs for the pelvic floor for home rehab or to do in conjunction with the pelvic floor PT. So I have a lot of people that do them with, because I can give them all this education information, and the pelvic floor PT can really get down to business, which is nice because there's only so much time in a session. Yeah. And then looking at diastasis, and then I have one for hips and posture.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so very much for coming on today. You have been really wonderful, and I'm sure the viewers will be very, very happy to get the chance to listen to everything you have just said. I will put all of the links down below so people will be able to find you and check out your different programs. So
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Yes, I hope it encourages someone to keep trying if they were thinking about, being at the end of the line.
Yeah. Wonderful.